So now I have the incredible honor of introducing our next conversation and opening remarks with the director of the Othering and Belonging Institute. I've been at the Institute now for 3 years, and honestly, if I had a nickel for every time I hear a story from someone about how Dr. John Powell's thinking and being has completely transformed a person, an institution, an entire field. And not just in California, and not just in North America, but all over the world, from education reformers and museum curators to global public policy, health policymakers, funders, legal scholars, on up to the highest offices of all kinds of governments. There's truly no field that hasn't been touched by John's visionary work. Yes, he has the most impeccable academic credentials. He knows the law, he knows history, he knows about neuroscience, he writes really important legal articles you need a graduate degree to understand. You might expect him to spend most of his time in his office thinking, but that's not who John is. He's also impatient to engage with the world. This institute wasn't created to be separate from all of you doing the work. John's leadership and ethos models that we're here to be on the front lines to change with you. I can tell you there's a deep spiritual sensibility in the way John loves people that means a lot to me. He's the real deal. It doesn't matter who you are, your race, your sex, your religion, your politics. He loves you and welcomes you into our house. This is our house, our house. He always corrects me when I'm saying we or when I say they or us. He says, no, we, it's our house. And because he loves people, you feel it in your bones when he speaks. That doesn't mean he will agree or avoid the tough conversations or remain neutral in questions of justice. It means he respects you enough to go there. Right? Can I get an amen? I heard a yes. Now, John and Othering and Belonging Institute's research director, Stephen Menendian, have a remarkable new book that just came out, Belonging Without Othering, which over 700 of you got free copies of yesterday. That line was huge. I can tell you myself, in preparing for this conference, that this simple but radical demand for belonging without othering has transformed me and virtually all the people I've been working with on this conference, from our staff to our artists to our speakers. Because in every single preparation meeting that we did to get ready for this conference, whether it was artists or speakers, we talked about the theme. And people were always like, there was always like a depth of understanding that hit somewhere deep. After John makes his opening remarks, he will be joined on stage for conversation with the one and only Maria Hinojosa, right? So please welcome Dr. John A. Powell to the stage. Come on, John.
Thank you. So it's so great to be here with all of you. The mic is too low or I'm too high. I don't know which is. First of all, I just want to say, the folks who put this together, they've been working hard and long with many hiccups. So I just want to thank Rochelle and the OBI team and family. So give us. And I also want to thank all of you as part of the family, but also want a special shout out to the newest member of my family, Simone, who's here. This is her first OBI conference. So I only have 10 minutes to sort of ground us in terms of what we mean and trying to evolve the concept of belonging without othering. So I have some slides that I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to have a wonderful conversation with Maria. So if we can have the first slide. So belonging without othering. You know, once you sort of step into this, you'll find out belonging has been an art that's been around for thousands of years. In fact, I remind people that we are born attached to another human being. It's not simply a metaphor, it's a reality. We are connected to each other. Now, when we come out, they cut the umbilical cord, but they never cut the spiritual cord. We stay connected if we stay human. Next slide. And so we all know racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, classism, and we make up new isms like, okay, we don't like tall black men who are old. I don't know, whatever. Those are made up. We have radical ways to other each other. But what happens is that sometimes conflict entrepreneurs take these concepts and weaponize them. And they become not just interpersonal, but they become social and structural. Next slide. And so when some of us hear this, we say, okay, we shouldn't other people. We're all the same. No. We are the same, but we're different. And you erase people by not acknowledging that a synagogue is not a mosque, is not a temple. There's similarities and they're different. So the opposite of othering is not saming, but belonging. Next slide. And so what is belonging? Belonging is a lot of things, and Stephen and I took 400 and something pages in a book to talk about what belonging and othering is. So I'm not going to try to do that right now, except to say that part of it is about power, part of it is about co-creation, part of it is about agency, part of it is about responsibility, part of it is about love. And it's an emerging concept, so we're not trying to define it for you, but asking you to step into it. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. Next slide. Again, I've already talked about there are all these creative ways in which we other each other. We use our ingenuity to find new ways of saying that someone doesn't fully belong, that someone is not quite human, that someone is less deserving. We tell these incredible stories, and then they seem real, they seem inevitable. Next slide. So one of the questions is, this is not just happening in the United States, this is happening all over the world, and I'm really pleased to say this conference leans into a much more global context. So we have people here from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia, from Europe. This is not a U.S. conference. This is not a U.S. problem. This is a global problem. And if it's a global problem, it can't all be blamed on Trump. He plays a role. I mean, he's good at othering. But why is it happening now? And one reason it's happening now is because we're going through rapid change. And as we go through change, rapid change in critical areas, it actually stresses us. Not just us, but almost any mammal can only process so much change in a short period of time without experiencing stress. And what do we do with that stress? Well, we have to make sense of it. We're meaning-making animals. And there are two major ways we make meaning of it. One of them is that it's somebody's fault. I'm having a bad day, it's somebody's fault. It's the dog's fault. It's my partner's fault. I don't know you, but it must be your fault. That's called othering. It's telling a story. And that's what's happening all around the world. You have authoritarian leaders telling stories about the other. The reason that Turkey is not what we want it to be is because of the other. It's not because of AI. It's not because of climate change. It's not because of the pandemic. It's because of a person. That's called a breaking story, a story where we blame the other for our disquiet, for our dis-ease. The other story is that, yes, the world is changing, and that's a little scary. We can only process so much change in a short period of time without being stressed. That's all of us, not just conservatives, not just liberals, but all of us. But another story is that, we're changing, the world is changing, but we're in it together. And as Scott said, I want to hear about you. Tell me about yourself. I'm curious about you. Not to change you, but to see you, to care about you, to love you. That's called bridging. So those are the two big stories, breaking stories and bridging stories. And if you can't read it, my hat says, a bridger. A bridger. I'm inviting all of you, I'm not insisting, you could decide, you might become a bridger as well. those accelerated changes are going to continue. So we're going to continue to be dealing with stress. And one of the things that accelerated changes means the old stories don't work. We can't simply tell the old stories over and over again. We need new stories. Trump has a story. What's our story? Next slide. Again, global phenomena is going to keep happening. Next slide. So part of the way we tell stories and part of the way we become who we are is through sacred symbols. So one of the ways you challenge someone is you challenge their sacred symbols. You deny their sacred symbols. The reason that the Nelson Mandela went to the rugby match is he knew it was the white South African sacred symbol. He was in some ways honoring their sacred symbols. So what's our sacred symbols? What's the sacred symbols of the people that you don't think of as your tribe? Next slide. So one of the big things in terms of othering is fear. We're afraid. And the thing we're most afraid of is that the world is evolving and there won't be a place for us and our kind. So the fear is about being other. And everyone, not just quote unquote the dominant group, but all of us are experiencing that fear. And so a lot of times when we think about othering and belonging, fear is at the heart of it. But there's another piece that's at the heart of it as well, and that is a yearning. We want, need, and have to belong. That's not based on fear. That's based on being human. That's based on being connected. That connectivity is already here. We just need to honor it. We need to actually structure it. So that's a good thing. Belonging is not just a reaction to fear. It's actually an expression of our deep need to experience our connectivity. Next slide. And you may have heard of this, Maslow's hierarchy, and he said that belonging is the third most important human need. His students said, good job, Maslow, but you got it wrong. Belonging is the first human need. You don't get safety and you don't get food unless you belong. That's... Next slide. So these are too many words, so I'm not going to read them. You can read them later. I'll make the slides available. Next slide. So this is the trajectory we go through. We're excluded, and then you're included. What is being included? You're invited into someone else's house. You're invited into someone else's party. You're invited into someone else's dinner. But it's still their thing. You're in my house. You're at my school. My rules apply. That's inclusion. Belonging, you co-create. You're not a guest. This is our conference. This is our space. This is our planet. We don't own it, but we're part of it, and it's a part of us. So co-create is a key for belonging, and it was to make belonging more radical than inclusion. Next slide. So can we imagine new structures, new cultures, new stories where everyone belongs? Everyone. So that's the journey that we're on, and we believe and hope that we're on this journey with most of, if not all of you. So with that, I'm going to invite my good friend Maria out to the stage. We're going to have a conversation. Thank you.
And while John is making his way to his seat, I am going to introduce Maria Hinojosa, who he will be in conversation with. It is an amazing honor to introduce Maria. She's one of the country's leading journalists and a true force of nature. You may know her from National Public Radio's Latino USA, which was right? She's hosted for 30 years, or her other journalistic work. She not only just received the prestigious Edward Murrow Lifetime Achievement Award, she is a Pulitzer Prize-winning, Emmy Award-winning journalist. And I just got hot off the press from her backstage. That's why I'm on my phone. Her team from Futuro Media was just nominated for the second Peabody Award. Yes. This time for their film After Uvalde on Frontline. The film is about educating the next generation about anti-gun activism, focusing on the heart of an 11-year-old activist survivor of the massacre. So for me, what that means, and we just shared that in the back, is that out of pain, out of suffering, if there's resilience, and we have that resilience and we can move past it, we create a generation of powerful organizers and powerful advocates for belonging, right? But here at the Othering and Belonging Institute, we know Maria as a friend, a brilliant straight talker, and the perfect person to be in lively, deep conversation with John about the theme of the conference and his new book. Please welcome the amazing, the fabulous Maria Hinojosa.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting it to be this full. Whoa, John, congratulations.
Well, you know, people heard that you were coming. It's like standing room only.
What a man. That's why we love John. This is really beautiful. Thank you to Oakland and to the Othering and Belonging Institute for inviting me, for having me here in conversation with you. Something that actually, John and I are usually in conversation like in the corner of a room in a conference named wherever, Puerto Rico, Johannesburg, someplace, and we're just like, so what do you think about this? You know what? So the possibility to be on stage in a conversation with John A. Powell is honestly truly, truly special for me, and I really look forward to learning a lot. And then we're going to take some questions. So get those questions ready. My first question to you, John, is: can you just tell us the first time that you remember being othered?
So I'm not sure I can, but I know I write in some of my writings about my family, and that people know that I have a really special family. I'm 6 of 9, and at some point there was a break in my family for me. My father's a Christian minister, and I started having difficulty with some of the doctrines coming out of the church, particularly the doctrine that unless you were a member of that church, not a Christian, unless you're a member of that church, you're going to hell. And I remember, and I won't take through all because of the time, but I remember saying, so does that mean the Chinese are going to hell? This is 11-year-old living in Detroit in Black Bottom. I didn't even know Chinese. But it struck me as problematic that they're going to hell. And the long and short of it is, I didn't go back to church after that, and it created this incredible fracture in my family and in my relationship with my dad.
So the first time that I remember feeling othered, it's very, very similar. We were actually a stone's throw, because I was a Mexican immigrant kid on the south side of Chicago. And I was walking with my Jewish best friend, and George Wallace was running for president. And we were walking home trying to figure out if George Wallace got elected president, where she and her Jewish family and me and my Mexican family, what basement we were going to hide in. Like literally, like, well, ours is easier to get to, but it's smaller. And she was like, yeah, ours is bigger, but harder to get to. What? And so the notion that it happens as a little kid is profound. Tell us the first time you remember feeling belonging.
Well, you know, like a lot of things, I didn't realize how much I felt belonging until I was othered. Valerie, and I don't know if she's here, she's a beautiful writer, she says, you know, we're in this dark space. We may think it's a tomb, but it may be a womb. And I was in a womb in my family. I mean, there was so much love and so much connectivity. I didn't think about it. I just accepted it. This is just the way life was. Life was good. Life was special. And then when I got pushed out of that, I realized I had belonged and I no longer belong. So it was only in reflection back that I realized that how deep. And now that I'm older and my family, we're back together, I'm just appreciative that I've had that journey of actually even being othered. I mean, that was an important lesson for me. But now we all belong to each other again.
So beautiful. So I'm imagining that when you were a little kid, sometimes these questions that you were asking yourself about othering and belonging felt like it was scrambling your brain. At what point did you realize that your obsession, as it were, with understanding othering and belonging was actually your superpower?
You know, I liked being a kid, and so I'm not letting go.
Preach!
And you know, I had I did some things well. My son, when he was taking tests, all these standardized tests, he would get perfect scores in math. And he would say, "Does everybody in the family have the math gene?" And I said, "It's not a math gene." And I was like that as a kid. And so I thought everybody could process information in the same way that I could. And like my son, I thought everyone could do math. I mean, it's simple, right? And it's only later that I realized, actually, true story, my older sister, I'm 6 of 9, she got a D on a math test. And I went to her name is Eunice. I said, "Eunice, how hard did you have to try to get that D?" And my mother ripped me a new hole. She said, "You arrogant little shit." But I was not being arrogant. I was serious. And it's at that point I realized, okay, something's going on. I'm not, and I was, you know, so I cognitively could process information, but emotionally, I was a rock. I'll give you one other example. My older brother, took me to a movie, and he was very proud. He's 5 years older than me, and I was 10. And it was just a movie about people traveling through outer space. And he bought me some popcorn, and I'm sitting there, and he says, how do you like the movie? He's all excited being a big brother. And I said, "It's okay, just a little corny." And he said, "What do you mean a little corny?" And I said, "Well, they're traveling in space. The stars are twinkling. The stars only twinkle because there's an atmosphere. Because there's no atmosphere in space, stars wouldn't twinkle." He never took me to a movie again.
I love that. Okay, so let's jump forward because we really want to talk about your book. Congratulations. It's a lot. And by the way, I have to say, John, the group that you have brought together here today is really special. This morning I was quite frazzled. I just flew in late. There were, you know, et cetera, New York, delays, et cetera. I didn't know where I was. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to get to someplace right now. And I saw a compañera, beautiful compañera with a tag. And I was like, oh my God, you're OBI. I mean, we must belong together. And these two beautiful women, in fact, one of them is the best dressed of all of us. You will know her. She's wearing a hat. All I know is that she's Vietnamese and that the both of them, one who's African American, one Vietnamese, and that they both are ethnic studies professors. That's all we got, but we had a beautiful ride. And I felt so rescued in that moment. And I was just like, this is the most beautiful way to start a conference. And so I just really want to give you the props, John, and your team, because you really have brought together an incredibly special group of people. So I think we are all so worried about what's happening. I'm worried, but I'm also incredibly enthusiastic about this moment in history. Honestly, I'm so enthusiastic, and I feel like what we are living through is, in fact, a lot of people deeply in a very internal conversation about othering and belonging, right? Like, where are we? How are we going to do this? How is our world going to come together? And I remain incredibly optimistic, believe it or not. So my question to you is, what we're living through in this country, though, is a deep sense of othering that has people freaking out. Yes. So can you explain othering as a process? Because this is something that our country has actually been perfecting. I'm about to use a slur. Hold on. trigger warning. Perfecting because we know that the first pilgrims who came actually were the first illegal aliens. They didn't have permission. They didn't have papers. And they came, and in fact, genocide happened. It was othering to the nth degree. Explain it in our country, how this process has happened and continues to happen.
Well, this has happened many, many times. So, as Sarah shared with you, I'm a pracademic, which means I hang out sometimes a lot with books. So one of the books is called The Dark Side of Democracy. And the writer says that if you look at any mature democracy, behind it is a process of ethnic cleansing. Australia was occupied when the British got there. The United States was occupied. And what happened to those people? In Australia, they actually taught for many years that it was vacant, that there was nobody there. And so that's an extreme form of othering. Just get out of here, right? We're struggling with that right now because one of the things about belonging is that sometimes in order to belong, we actually other people. So sometimes othering is a function of belonging. If you want to be part of this group, you got to hate that group. If you want to be part of this group, you got to kill that group. And we tell stories about that group. And so we tell stories about Native Americans scalping people, where really the process actually largely started with Europeans scalping Native Americans. But that's not the story you hear. So yes, ethnic cleansing, unfortunately, was part of nation building and part of modernity and part of what we call democracies. And we're actually facing those issues right now, by saying some people don't count, some people don't belong here, get off our land. It's like, when did this become your land? So we have to confront this. The last thing I'll say is that othering and belonging, some people think about it as a feel-good, and it does. It's a loving expression of humanity and the earth itself. But it also has some very hard strictures. You don't get to deny other people's humanity. Full stop.
So even though John and I met later in our professional lives, I feel like he was a part of me. He was always with me because that is how I operate as a journalist. It's interesting because that's my profession. I have to, like just a week ago, sit down with a man in eastern New Mexico who looked at me and said, if I had my druthers, the law of the land would be no abortion under any circumstance for anyone, and any woman who did have an abortion would be charged with attempted murder. No, not attempted. When it's even more intense, it's like premeditated murder. And I have to sit and listen, right, and find a place to find how we belong together. In that case, it's as a journalist, asking a question and then telling the story. So when people are like, well, so how do we deal with that? Like, how do we belong without othering? Are they flip sides? And how does that pretzel in your brain work itself out so that as we walk out here, we can be understanding that we're doing both, othering and belonging?
Well, it's an important question. And a lot of people assume that they're just a flip side of each other, and you have one, you have to have the other. I would say be suspicious of necessities. That is, that it has to be this way, just because it is this way. We have to have a capitalist system because we have a capitalist system. We have to have othering because we do othering. And so here's a quick story. Most of us in this room are Homo sapiens.
And there's a few others.
But here's the stories about Homo sapiens. So some people, and as we sort of think about othering and as we get into the literature, there's a lot of research and suggestion that othering, us and them, is wired into our brains, that we have to other. And so it's kind of hopeless. Actually, that's a story, but here's a different story. and it's told by a number of people, including Harari in the book *Sapien*, that thousands of years ago, we were mainly in small groups or bands, no bigger than 200, usually about 50, people you had contact with every day. And sometimes these bands would come together and fight. So the Homo sapiens would fight the Neanderthals. And eventually, the Homo sapiens prevail. And first people thought, well, it's because the Homo sapiens were smarter. But then when people looked at it, it's like, actually, they weren't. Or were they bigger? No, smaller. Were they faster? No, slower. So how did they prevail? So here's a different story. The story is they prevailed because 70 to 100,000 years ago, something happened. They discovered imagination and symbols. They became not just animals, not just another human, they became symbolic animals. And in that symbolism, they started telling stories that created larger we's. So instead of 50 and 100 or 200 groups in a band, they had thousands. But the thing that held them together was the ability to cooperate. And the ability to cooperate allowed them to prevail over their cousins, the Neanderthals. That is where we are today. Can we? And so the symbolic nature, that nature has given us the possibility of telling stories using symbols that aren't given. We can arrange these symbols in multiple ways. So can we imagine a world where everyone belongs and no one is other? There's nothing to prevent us from that except our lack of imagination. We can do it.
Backstage, I was telling John that recently I was probably in the symbol most of othering, which is the border wall in Arizona. Like so othering. And it's like Darth Vader architecture. It's so disgusting. It's just gross. Also, by the way, you should know that at least in the part where I was visiting, it's 21 miles of wall with 19 openings. So maybe they're othering and also saying, you belong here. I hadn't thought of that in that precise moment. Es una locura, o sea, es una locura because the wall is there saying don't, and then you can find places where you can actually walk through. And I was explaining to John that at the wall, of course, felt the most othered, but right on the U.S. side of the wall now, there are now encampments of refugees and migrants on the U.S. side because they cross and they are not running from the Border Patrol as we're being told. These scary people who are running away from the Border Patrol, they are literally crossing in all of one of those openings, and then they are sitting down, praying or staying in a tent in an encampment until the Border Patrol comes to get them. And it was in that experience, in that encampment, of course I cried. Of course I cried. But so did some of the Samaritans who were working there. And then we met 2 travelers, and then we cried more. The point is that in the face of that othering wall, we found this community of human beings just belonging together. Undocumented Guatemalan refugees, U.S., belonging. And you talk about the importance of story. So why is it important that I tell that story, or that you tell this story, or that we share the stories? Why is that such an essential part of your work at OBI?
Well, 2 things. So I don't want to other the Neanderthals. I have a true story. Former dean of the law school at Berkeley, Chris Sedley, a friend of mine, he read an article, and the article said something like, a substantial number of people on the planet actually have Neanderthal blood. Like, so they used to think that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens didn't cross-pollinate. They did, apparently. And so some of us was walking around with Neanderthal blood, and Chris says, that explains a lot. But no, I don't think the Neanderthals were especially violent, so I don't think it explains very much at all. The world doesn't just happen. We get to tell stories about it. An event happens, and then we have to make meaning of it. The meanings we make are critical. The gift that nature has given us to be able to tell stories, to be able to make meaning, is just such a wonderful gift. It not only allows us to be the next step of human, if you will, but it actually allows us to tell stories and reclaim our own humanity in relationship to others. We're only fully human, I believe. We're only fully human when we are acknowledging our connection to each other and our connection to the earth. Human comes from the word humus, which means of the earth. If we separate ourselves from the earth, that's some story that some people told, and that's the story of modernity. That's a bad story, that we're separate from each other, that we're separate from earth. We don't stop there. And there's a line, we're running out of time, but there's a line, Leonard Cohen, I love songs. He says, "You who leave everything that you cannot control, it starts with your family, and soon it comes round to your soul." So what we've done in the West is we've left everything that we can't control. And the things that we can't control, instead of being curious, as Scott suggested, we think we have to dominate them. You know, have you noticed stories about the woods? The woods are scary. We like parks because everything is under control. I put a flower there, stay. I'll be back to water you next week. The woods, that's not having it. And so the woods is scary. We tend to be afraid of things we can't control. So stories open us up not just to nature out there, but to nature in here. If we don't tell the right stories, if we don't make the right connection, then we not only don't connect with each other, we don't connect with ourselves.
So I'm going to open it up to questions, and we're actually going to start at the very top level. But before we do that, John, I love that this was a question that I got that John approved of. So I was like, I have to ask this one. Do you go through the world with a story or a song?
So play with that. I mean, obviously, the world is not a binary. You could do both. But most of us have a predilection. Something happens, and immediately a story starts happening. Or for me, growing up in Detroit with Motown, with Stevie Wonder, with Marvin Gaye, come on now. So stories, they're nice, but to me, it's a song. I go through the world with a song. So, but stories happen as well.
And the specific song that you're listening to in your brain today is?
Well, you know, we had a wonderful dinner last night, and someone was talking about in Colombia that they're learning to have to deal with breaking, not in society. They've been doing that for a while, but breaking in the family. We've been breaking in the family for a long time, so we're expert at that. To them, it's a new thing to have breaking within the family. And so when I heard that, I said, slide in the family stone. It's a family affair.
That's what I'm talking about.
And the line he used is that blood is thicker than mud, saying that blood is thicker than mud. So yes, there's stuff in the family, but it's still family. You never really break. So that's one of the songs I'm carrying with me now.
I'm going to be hearing that all day today. And I hope we can do a little bit of dancing too. Just a round of applause for John A. Powell, please. We're so happy he was that nerd in Detroit. We love that. Love that. Okay, so way up at the very tippity top, we have people with microphones. And just ask your question real quick, please, so we can get to as many as possible.
Hi, good morning. My name is Joy.
Hold on a second. Can you just wave where you are so we can see? Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Joy, so I'll offer that value to the conference. And my question is it not so that in order to belonging to happen, there's a necessity for the dominant group to cede power so that it can be shared? But also within this dominant group, there's so much anxiety that's taking the shape of culture wars, of paramilitary violence, etc. So what would you say is the seed that must be planted to tend to their anxiety?
It's a great question. So I'm not sure who the dominant group is. So if you look at society and you sort of look at them, we all occupy multiple spaces. We all have multiple identities. I'm a man. Does that make me dominant? I'm a black man. Am I still dominant? I'm an old black man. Does that still make me dominant? You know, so the thing I'm saying is that there are categories, and these categories are fluid and changing and circumstantial. When I leave the United States, all of a sudden, I'm an American. When I'm in the United States, I don't think of myself as an American. So I think we have to be careful. Now, I say the suburban white housewife who can't pay her mortgage, who has 3 children and no food, is she dominant? She's white. She's poor. That's not dominant. So again, it's complicated. The assumption that if you share, you give up, I think is backwards. If you share, you get. On multiple levels. Because if I'm not sharing with Maria, I'm not learning, I'm not getting the beauty and the joy and the spirit that she brings to the table. So in a sense, we're offering something to people. And what's nice in a way is that the world is full of anxiety. I'll let that sink in for a minute. The recent data shows that the group in the United States that's maybe the most anxious is not black women, it's not even trans people, it's straight white men. Now, I'm not saying let your heart just bleed for straight white men. And I'm not saying they don't have more benefits and a history different than people who are not straight white men. But I'm saying our capacity to see their pain too matters. And so everybody belongs.
So at Futuro Media, there's only one word that is officially banned from all of our, well, 2. Obviously illegal to identify a human being. We never use that term, ever. But the other word that we don't use is minority. Ever. Because then what we are doing is, obviously we know how minorities are treated in this country, so we understand why white men are like, shoot, I'm going to be a minority soon, it's going to be hell. So, it's going to be hell for me. And what all of the work of John is saying is that, no, actually, but you can belong too. And for those of you who follow me on social media, particularly on Instagram, I work out in Connecticut. I have a teeny cottage this size, this big, in Connecticut, in a very white, red part of the town, of the city, of the state. And it's run by women who support Trump. And so every week I am there in an engagement of seeing them and not ceding space and not silencing myself and negotiating that place, because when we're in the gym together, we all belong together. So what happens when suddenly we leave? I'm considering asking them all to my house. That's how seriously I take this, which is, come into my space, see where I live, so I am no longer a stranger to you and therefore not scary. Tales from the front in Connecticut. Okay, second level. Second level. We have people walking around with mics. When we get to somebody, I see somebody right there in front of me, but I don't know if there's a... Okay, wave your arm wherever you are. Do you have the mic?
I am in front of a mic.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Laure, and I work around belonging and technology, and I'm curious, when we're thinking about how technology is shifting things, particularly because in the past, there's sort of a visibility to the entrenchment of othering, like institutionalized othering is visible. In technology, that's made invisible. And I'm curious, how do we address that, or investigate that for ourselves?
You got to answer that one, John.
I have some students at Berkeley, probably some of them are here. I know some of them are here. And the thing about people who are really curious is they ask great questions, and great questions don't always have an immediate answer. We have to spend time with not knowing. If we insist upon knowing everything, we back into modernity. Life is a mystery. Life is unfolding. Life is emerging. And I'm not shy. I'm an introvert, but not shy. But I know there are a lot of things I don't know. So I don't know the answer to your question, but I will say this. I think we approach these questions together. They're not something that we should leave to Silicon Valley, to Apple, to Google, to Meta. Going back to the previous question about domination, I think domination in many ways happened largely through structures and systems, not just through people. I oftentimes say, be hard on structures and generous toward people. Oftentimes we're hard on people and generous toward structures. So in terms of AI and these other things, it's actually interesting. I don't know how much I'm supposed to say, but let me just say, I know some of the leading IT people at major tech companies in the United States. Some of them are friends. They are grappling with these issues as well. They need help. We need to help them. So part of the message of belonging is engagement. All of us need to be engaged to the extent that we have capacity. It's not a world that we're coming into as a guest. We are making the world that we're going to live in. And how technology fits into that, I think we have to collectively find out. We have to know some new language. We have to imagine things. But it should be something that we co-create as a collective community. And no one should be invisible in that community.
Love that. Okay, we have, let's come to this area on the first floor. And we can't see anything here. There we go. Okay. Oops. Well, hold on. We have somebody running with a mic, getting their steps in.
One practice that we can do that will assist us in engaging in conversations with people who literally want us dead? Okay? As someone of faith, of multiple faiths, that stretch to, how do I fall in love with a person who doesn't think I'm human?
Yes. It's a great question. The question was,
how do you fall in love with someone who doesn't see you, acknowledge your humanity, may not even want your presence here?
I'm reminded of a story and a song. So I'll tell you a couple of quick examples. One of my sisters, taught special ed, what they call special ed. It was children who were neurodiversity, who were kicked out of public schools. She did that for 40 years. And she talked about one of the students she had who was having difficulty, and he didn't have any friends, and he was troubled. Now, he didn't hate her, but he was acting out. He was a bully. He was big. He was whatever. And she just loved him. And she said at one point, she was talking to him. Her name was, at that time, Miss Gerald. And he said, "Leave me alone, Miss Gerald." Something like, you don't know me, you don't love me, you don't know who I am. And her response was, "You know what? I may not know you, but I love you, and you can't do anything about it." She turned him around. There are people who work in that arena you're talking about, and about people who are so hateful. And I've asked them, have you ever met someone that was not reachable? And they said no. But part of loving is not about the other person, it's about you. We all, and I'm not saying if you're experiencing trauma, if someone's after you, if someone's trying to hurt you, don't let them hurt you. Loving also extends to yourself. But I worry a little bit sometimes when I think we give whatever we call the other side way too much power. I don't need permission to be here on the earth. I don't need permission to belong. I'm not giving that power to anyone. And sometimes it annoys me, people annoy me. Sometimes I don't want to be around them. Sometimes I don't like them. But I still hold on to their humanity. In part, I think that's the right thing to do, but it's also a way of holding on to my own humanity. So I don't have a single practice, but I would say what Maria suggested earlier. Get to know them. If you can, if there's space, if there's bandwidth, sit down and talk to them. Have them get to know you. So people ask me sometimes, will I go talk to people who hate black people? And I said, one condition, not that they love black people, that there's no violence. I think I'm pretty cool.
No, you are. You are.
And, I'll tell you this.
Approved.
It amazes me. I have a baby daughter. When I look at her, it's not conceivable to me that anyone who meet her wouldn't fall in love with her. And so I believe that love, that hate can only be maintained by keeping a distance, by keeping a story that's not true, by keeping flattening the other. There is no other. So I don't know if there's a practice of doing it, but it seems to me, frankly, many of the great religions, from Islam to Confucianism to Christianity to Buddhism, that's really what they're about. But do it in a way that's real for you, that's respecting you. If you're not there, don't go there. I'll end by just saying, some of you have heard me talk about Pastor McBride, who's a local brother here in the Bay Area. He and his brother, yes indeed, Faith in Action. When I talked to him about bridging, he asked me, are you telling me I got to bridge with the devil? And there's a session later in the conference on long bridging. And I said to Michael, that's a long bridge. Don't start there. Start with something that's doable. Don't take the most difficult thing and weigh yourself down. I said, but also be careful on who you call the devil.
All right, a round of applause for John A. Powell. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you so much, John and Maria. Amazing.
So I'm going to say one last thing. This is our movement, not OBI's, not Maria's, not mine. This is our. You all belong. Let's make it happen.
Hey. Thank you, thank you.